Hello everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're diving into the story behind one of the most beloved holidays in the United States, Thanksgiving. For many people, this day brings warm images of families gathering around the dinner table, sharing food, laughter, and memories. We think of golden roast turkey, sweet pumpkin pie, and the feeling of being surrounded by people we love. But Thanksgiving is much more than a big meal. It's a day built on history, gratitude, and the journey of two very different cultures who learned to survive together. In this episode, we'll explore how this tradition began, why it continues today, and what it truly means. And of course, as always, you'll be learning English through a real historical story told in simple, clear, and friendly language. Thanksgiving has been celebrated for centuries. But many people don't know how it really began, or why it became such an important symbol of American culture. The story goes back more than 400 years, to a time when life was harsh, uncertain, and often dangerous. In this podcast, we'll follow the footsteps of the Pilgrims, a group of people who left England searching for freedom, and the Native Americans who had lived on the land for thousands of years before them. Their meeting, their struggles, and the unexpected friendship they built became the foundation of the first Thanksgiving. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey as we travel through time to discover the true origin of this special holiday. In the early 1600s, life in England was far from easy for many ordinary people. The king demanded that everyone follow the same church and the same religious practices. Anyone who believed differently could face punishment, heavy fines, or even prison. Among those searching for freedom were the Pilgrims, a small religious group who wanted to worship in their own way. But their struggles didn't end with religion. Land was scarce, jobs were limited, and many families lived in deep poverty. The idea of a new world, a place across the ocean filled with forests, open land, and opportunity, began to feel like a promise of hope. And so, driven by dreams of starting over, the Pilgrims made a decision that would change their lives forever. They would leave England behind and sail toward an unknown future. In 1620, about 102 passengers boarded a small wooden ship called the Mayflower. It was never meant for long voyages across the Atlantic, yet it became their only path to freedom. The journey lasted 66 exhausting days. The ship was crowded, the air was damp, and storms constantly shook the vessel. Many people became seasick, some grew weak, and fear was a constant companion. Imagine spending more than 2 months in a dark, cramped space, unsure if you would ever see land again. Yet the Pilgrims held on to their faith and their dreams. In one of their writings, a passenger described the ocean as a wilderness of waves, reminding us just how terrifying the journey felt. But finally, after weeks of uncertainty, they saw land on the horizon. When the Pilgrims finally reached North America in November, winter had already arrived. The cold was sharp, the winds were unforgiving, and the land was nothing like England. There were no houses, no farms, and no warm fireplaces waiting for them. They had only a few tools, limited food, and fragile shelter. The first winter was brutally difficult. Nearly half of the group died from hunger, illness and freezing temperatures. In their journals, they described nights filled with prayer, asking simply for safety and warmth. But despite the heartbreak, the survivors refused to give up. Their belief that they had come to the new world for a purpose kept them moving. Even when the world around them felt impossibly harsh. Their hope returned when they met the Native Americans who had lived on this land for generations. These indigenous people understood the forests, the seasons, and the harsh winters in ways the Pilgrims did not. They introduced new foods, new farming methods, and new ways to survive. This meeting marked a turning point, the moment when the Pilgrims realized that they could not survive alone. Thanks to this support, they slowly learned how to live in the new world. What began as a desperate struggle soon became a story of resilience, learning, and unexpected friendship. After surviving the brutal winter, the Pilgrims faced another challenge. Learning how to live on land they barely understood. The forests were unfamiliar, the animals were different from those in Europe, and the soil required new farming methods. At this uncertain moment, they encountered the Wampanoag people, one of the many Native American tribes living in the region for thousands of years. The Wampanoag knew the land with deep wisdom, passed down through generations. Their leader, Chief Massasoit, approached the Pilgrims with caution, but also with a vision for peace. Both sides had reasons to be careful, yet both also understood that cooperation could bring safety. This first contact was more than a meeting. It was the beginning of a relationship that would change the future of the colony. Among the Wampanoag was a man who would become one of the most important figures in the Pilgrims' survival. Squanto. Unlike others, Squanto spoke English, a skill he gained after being taken to Europe years earlier before eventually returning home. His story was marked by loss and hardship, yet he chose to use his knowledge to help the newcomers. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to plant corn, a crop essential to survival in the region. He showed them how to use fish as fertilizer to nourish the soil, how to identify edible plants, and how to fish the local rivers. His guidance transformed the Pilgrims' daily lives. With each lesson, they gained not just knowledge, but also hope. As the months passed, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag began to build trust. They shared tools, exchanged food, and learned from one another. The Pilgrims discovered new techniques for farming and hunting, while the Wampanoag learned about European goods and tools. Even with cultural differences, both sides recognized the value of cooperation. A fragile but meaningful friendship grew. Historical accounts describe this period as one of mutual respect, with both communities working together for survival. This partnership was not perfect, but in a time of uncertainty, it offered strength. It is this rare moment of connection that forms the heart of the Thanksgiving story. By the following autumn, the Pilgrims had something they had not experienced since their arrival: stability. With the knowledge they gained from the Wampanoag, they harvested enough crops to survive the winter. For the first time, they felt a sense of security, and they knew they owed much of this success to the guidance and generosity of their Native American neighbors. Their gratitude set the stage for what would become one of the most famous gatherings in American history: the first Thanksgiving. What began as a story of fear and hardship had transformed into a rare example of partnership between two very different peoples. By the end of that first year, the relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag had grown into something unexpectedly strong. Their shared efforts, from learning how to farm, fish, and hunt, to building trust through daily cooperation, finally led to a season of stability. For the first time since arriving in the New World, the Pilgrims were not fighting for survival every single day. Their fields produced corn, their storage held food, and their spirits slowly lifted. This sense of relief naturally sparked a desire to pause, reflect, and express gratitude. And so, in the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims decided to hold a feast. But they knew this moment belonged not just to them. It belonged to the Wampanoag, as well to the people whose generosity had turned fear into hope. Historical accounts say the celebration lasted 3 days. Nearly 90 Wampanoag men arrived at the Pilgrim settlement, bringing deer, wild birds, and other game to contribute to the shared meal. The Pilgrims prepared what they had harvested: corn, beans, squash, pumpkins, and berries. From the rivers and coastline came fish and shellfish. There were no ovens, no pie crusts, and no recipes written on paper. Just simple cooking over open fires. Smoke drifted through the settlement as families shared pots and pans, preparing food in ways new to the Europeans but familiar to the Wampanoag. Yet the most meaningful part of the feast was not the menu. It was the act of gathering two different peoples sitting side by side, connected by gratitude rather than fear. As the feast continued, the settlement filled with sounds of celebration, laughter, friendly games, and the soft rhythm of conversation. People challenged each other in races, archery, and other skills. Children watched with curiosity, learning pieces of two cultures at once. The Pilgrims shared what tools they had, while the Wampanoag demonstrated hunting techniques and traditional practices. Women from both groups exchanged knowledge about preparing meals using ingredients found in the New World. Though they spoke different languages, gestures, patience, and goodwill became their bridge. In these moments, the hardships of the previous winter felt distant, replaced by a rare sense of understanding between two very different worlds. The first Thanksgiving was not a perfect moment, nor was it the start of everlasting peace. But it was a sincere expression of gratitude, the Pilgrims giving thanks to God, to nature, and to the Wampanoag whose guidance had been essential. It was also a reflection of the human desire to come together after hardship. Even though future years would bring challenges and conflicts, this brief moment of harmony left a lasting mark on American history. Today, the story of that first feast continues to remind people that Thanksgiving is not only about food and tradition, but also about connection, humility, and shared humanity. After the first Thanksgiving feast of 1621, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag returned to their daily routines, carrying with them the memory of those rare days of unity. That early celebration, however, did not immediately become an annual tradition, nor was it widely known across the colonies. Life in the New World remained harsh, and each settlement faced unique challenges. Still, the spirit of giving thanks quietly began to take root. In the decades that followed, communities in New England held their own days of Thanksgiving, often after a plentiful harvest, a military victory, or relief from hardship. These gatherings were small and focused heavily on prayer, yet they preserved the idea that gratitude deserved a special moment of recognition. Slowly, a simple feast shared between two groups began to evolve into a meaningful, regional custom. As more European settlers arrived and moved across the continent, they carried the tradition with them. Families migrating from New England into other colonies shared stories of the Pilgrims and their first harvest celebration. Churches played a major role as well. Ministers encouraged communities to dedicate a day each year to prayer, reflection, and gratitude. These gatherings brought unity to towns that often struggled with isolation and uncertainty. By the 1700s, Thanksgiving observances had become common throughout the northeastern colonies, though each community celebrated in its own way. Some held feasts, others focused on worship. There was no fixed date. Celebrations could fall in September, October, or November. But the message always remained: to pause and acknowledge life's blessings. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, newspapers helped carry the tradition even further. Articles described Thanksgiving celebrations in various towns, inspiring readers to adopt similar customs. Letters exchanged between families preserved memories of past Thanksgiving meals, even when relatives lived far apart. These personal stories strengthened the idea of Thanksgiving as a shared cultural expectation. At the same time, the holiday became a symbol of family connection. After the harvest season, people finally had the time to travel and reunite with loved ones. These gatherings brought comfort, warmth, and a sense of community during the colder months. By this point, Thanksgiving was widely recognized, though still inconsistent. A tradition without a national date, celebrated differently across a rapidly growing nation. Even without official recognition, Thanksgiving had become a meaningful part of American identity. It reminded communities of the Pilgrims' struggles, the help of the Wampanoag, and the power of cooperation in difficult times. It celebrated resilience, gratitude, and togetherness, values deeply cherished by early Americans. Yet, as the country expanded, the lack of a unified date created a sense of imbalance. Some states celebrated in October, others in November, and some did not celebrate at all. Many leaders believed that a national holiday could help strengthen unity. The idea slowly gained support, but it would take one persistent woman, and eventually a president, to transform Thanksgiving from scattered local traditions into one shared national celebration. For many years, Thanksgiving remained a regional tradition, celebrated differently from one state to another. Some held their Thanksgiving days in October, others in November, and some states ignored the holiday entirely. This lack of unity led many Americans to wonder whether the country should choose one national date. Among the voices pushing for this idea was Sarah Josepha Hale, a writer, editor, and one of the most influential women of the 19th century. Hale believed deeply in the power of shared traditions. She spent decades writing articles, publishing recipes, and sending hundreds of letters to governors and presidents, urging them to support a national Thanksgiving holiday. In her editorials, she described Thanksgiving as a festival that can unite hearts, a celebration that could bring comfort and gratitude to families across the nation. Despite her dedication, her proposal remained unanswered for many years. The United States was growing rapidly, and political tensions were increasing as states argued over major issues like slavery, identity, and power. The idea of a national holiday seemed unimportant to many leaders. But everything changed in 1861, when the nation entered the Civil War, a conflict that tore families apart and tested the country's future. In this dark and painful moment, Sarah Hale's vision gained new relevance. A holiday focused on gratitude, reflection, and unity was no longer just a cultural idea. It became a moral necessity. Hale continued writing, urging the government to establish a day when all Americans, North and South, could pause and remember their shared humanity. Her persistence finally reached the right person, President Abraham Lincoln. In 1863, as the Civil War raged on, Lincoln read Hale's letter requesting a national day of thanksgiving. Moved by her words and recognizing the country's desperate need for healing, Lincoln decided to act. With the help of his Secretary of State, William H. Seward, he issued a presidential proclamation declaring that Thanksgiving would be observed on the last Thursday of November. In the proclamation, Lincoln wrote that Americans should give thanks for the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies, and offer prayers to heal the wounds of the nation. His decision did not end the war, but it gave Americans a moment of peace, a shared opportunity to reflect on gratitude in a time of deep suffering. From that year forward, Thanksgiving began to change. For the first time, the United States celebrated together. Families, churches, and communities across both the North and the South paused on the same day to acknowledge life's blessings. Schools began teaching the story of the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. Newspapers printed Lincoln's proclamation, and communities formed new traditions centered on family, food, and giving thanks. While the Civil War continued, the holiday became a small but powerful symbol of unity. In the years that followed, Thanksgiving grew into one of the nation's most meaningful celebrations, a day shaped by Sarah Hale's determination and Abraham Lincoln's compassion. Their efforts transformed Thanksgiving from a scattered regional custom into a cherished national tradition that Americans still honor today. In the generations that followed Abraham Lincoln's proclamation, Thanksgiving continued to grow and evolve, eventually becoming one of the most cherished holidays in the United States. As families settled across different regions of the country, they brought their own customs, foods, and traditions to the celebration. By the early 20th century, Thanksgiving had transformed from a simple day of prayer and gratitude into a national ritual centered around family gatherings and shared meals. The image of a roasted turkey at the center of the table became iconic, and recipes for stuffing, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie began appearing in cookbooks across the nation. While the foods varied from region to region, from southern cornbread to New England seafood, the heart of the celebration remained the same. A moment to pause, to gather, and to be thankful. As cities grew and technology advanced, Thanksgiving found new ways to bring people together. Large public events such as parades became part of the tradition. The most famous of these, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City, began in 1924 and quickly became a national spectacle. Giant balloons, marching bands, and festive floats delighted millions of Americans who watched in person or gathered around their radios and later their televisions. Another tradition emerged at the same time: football games held on Thanksgiving Day. Teams from colleges and professional leagues played in front of huge crowds, and watching football soon became a reunion ritual for many families. These modern traditions added excitement and entertainment, blending seamlessly with the holiday's older values of gratitude and togetherness. But Thanksgiving has never been only about celebration. It has also become a time to give back. Across the country, volunteers prepare meals for the homeless, deliver food to seniors, and support organizations that serve people in need. Many families make it a yearly tradition to donate groceries or spend part of the day helping at shelters. Communities host charity runs, often called turkey trots, to raise money for local causes. This spirit of service reflects one of the holiday's deepest messages. Gratitude grows when it is shared. Thanksgiving encourages people not only to appreciate what they have, but also to extend kindness to others, continuing a legacy that began with cooperation and generosity centuries ago. As America continued to grow throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, Thanksgiving took on new layers of meaning that reflected the country's changing identity. No longer just a day connected to Pilgrims and Native Americans, it evolved into a cultural symbol that touched nearly every aspect of American life. For many families, Thanksgiving became a yearly ritual that reinforced unity, tradition, and a sense of belonging. In workplaces and schools, the holiday signaled the beginning of the winter season, a time to slow down, reconnect, and prepare for the year's end. Television specials, school plays, and community events helped pass the story of Thanksgiving from one generation to the next, shaping the nation's understanding of gratitude and history. At the same time, Thanksgiving also became a moment for deeper reflection. As historical research expanded, Americans began reconsidering the traditional narrative they had grown up with. Many indigenous voices called attention to the hardships faced by Native American communities after European settlement. Some groups chose to observe the day as a national day of mourning, honoring ancestors and acknowledging the pain that followed colonization. These perspectives did not erase the value of Thanksgiving, but they broadened it, encouraging Americans to approach the holiday with both gratitude and awareness. This shift reflected a more honest national conversation about history, one that sought not to divide, but to understand. Despite these evolving viewpoints, Thanksgiving continued to anchor itself as a celebration of connection. Families traveled across states just to spend a few hours together. College students returned home. Military members received special leave, and communities opened their doors to those who had nowhere else to go. The holiday became one of the busiest travel periods of the year, demonstrating how deeply people valued time with loved ones. In many homes, traditions blended cultural backgrounds. Italian-American families prepared pasta alongside turkey. Mexican-American families served tamales. And Asian-American households integrated flavors from their heritage. These blended menus reflected America's diversity, transforming Thanksgiving from a single historical story into a larger celebration of multicultural identity. Economically, Thanksgiving also shaped society in unexpected ways. The growth of Black Friday turned the weekend into one of the biggest retail events of the year, influencing business strategies, consumer behavior, and even national advertising trends. While more commercial in nature, this shift highlighted how Thanksgiving weekend had become a cornerstone of American life, a moment that touched everything from family meals to financial markets. Through every change, the heart of the holiday remained grounded in a simple idea: to pause, reflect, and appreciate life's blessings. In a fast-paced world filled with constant noise, Thanksgiving offered something rare: a reminder to slow down, gather close, and remember what truly matters. As we come to the end of today's episode, I hope this journey through the history of Thanksgiving has given you more than just facts. I hope it has offered you a deeper sense of connection to the past, to the people who came before us, and to the values that continue to shape our world today. Thanksgiving is not only a holiday. It is a reminder to pause, to breathe, to look around and to recognize the moments, the people, and the blessings that make our lives meaningful.